And now to introduce our next honoree, please welcome back 2018 inductee Dave Jackson.
Thank you. It's been mentioned now, I will mention again, 3 times about the magic metropolis of Ontario, California. And there was a lot of magic there, but I wouldn't call it glamorous because I remember being in this poorly lit hotel in the ballroom. There's an open bar, which is not really a good idea around podcasters, and there's about 80 podcasters, and there's poor Todd Cochran trying to hold their attention through the built-in PA system, which is in the ceiling, which has the clarity of a broken McDonald's drive-through speaker. And Todd introduces this guy who's going to deliver a report. And that report was the first time I almost heard Tom Webster. And I've been listening ever since. See, Tom is the guy who really understands the true power of podcasting. And through his work at Edison Research and now Sounds Profitable, he's given us the good news and sometimes the not so good news. And he'd already been helping radio forever. He helped Howard Stern understand his audience, and now it was time to help podcasters understand theirs. And sure, when it comes to presentations, if somebody asks me, hey, do you want to go listen to a 40-minute presentation about stats and numbers? We're all like, yay, right? But here's the thing. Presentations are made up of content and delivery. You gotta have both. And if you think about it, that could have been horribly boring, right? Hey, look, Facebook is up 2.3%. Woo! But it's Tom's delivery, his delivery, that made these reports memorable. Yes, the research was solid, but the charts and graphs were interspersed with stories, with insights filled with wit and humor that kept your attention. I don't know anybody, I do not know anyone who's ever walked out of a Tom Webster presentation. It just doesn't happen. Tom has helped literally so many things. And it was Sounds Profitable that organized the first full-day session devoted to podcasts at South by Southwest. Not an easy feat to pull off. All the while, like your favorite kind of college professor, wise, all you need is like the padded shoulders on the jacket. That would be perfect. But he kind of gave us homework. Master your craft. Be recommendable. And of course, murder your thirst with liquid death. And when people talk about quantity over quality, Tom said, look, in podcasting, there is only quality. And if you can't maintain quality at the quantity you're doing, you need to slow your pace. No ifs, ands, ors, or buts. In 2024, he released pretty much my favorite book on podcasting. The book is called The Audience is Listening, and I realize this is the last presentation, so let's do a little crowd participation, shall we? Wake ourselves up, put your phone down. Forget the address is audienceislisteningbook.com. Repeat, audienceislisteningbook. One more time like you mean it. And no, that is not my affiliate link. So Tom, for telling us the good news and the bad news occasionally, with the goal of making podcasting bigger, better, faster, and stronger, it really is my honor to induct Tom Webster into the Podcast Hall of Fame.
I've got about 65 slides to run through, so I'm going to go ahead and start. Someone got my clicker. Thank you for this. I got into this whole podcasting business because I've always had a love for spoken word audio. I don't much cotton to video, so I don't do a lot of video podcast consumption myself. I know I have to write and talk about it a lot, but it's really been the magic of the spoken word that has propelled me through my entire career. I grew up in Down East Maine. I was an only child. Grew up in the 70s there, and we didn't have a lot of entertainment options. I think we had 3 TV channels, and 2 of them were Canadian. One of them only showed the Beachcombers, and the other one showed information about the Beachcombers. And I think the 2 radio stations we had, one of them was Maine Public Radio, and the other one I think just broadcast tidal information, tidal charts for the high tides and low tides and things like that, which is riveting. But at night, I could put an AM radio, if the clouds were right, under my pillow, and I could get, at night, I could get WBZ Boston. I could listen to the Larry King Overnight Show, which when Larry King was on the radio doing overnight radio, that was a truly magical show. This is long before he started to mail it in on TV. But his craft with telling a story really nurtured my interest in spoken word audio. And I went to college. At Tufts University, and I got the chance to hear a lot of amazing poets and artists and authors and writers. I got to hear Seamus Heaney, who won the Nobel Prize in 1995. And remember, at Seamus's Nobel Prize induction, he said, "If you have the words, you will almost always find the way." Not the will, but the words, because the words had the real power there. I got a chance to go hear Seamus Heaney when I was a student there, and poets like Yvonne Boland read their work and bring it alive the way that it did not when I necessarily read it on the page. Spalding Gray, I got a chance to see Spalding Gray. Lance just mentioned him, who was such a great monologuist that they made an entire movie of him sitting behind a desk drinking a glass of water with a map behind him that was done by Jonathan Demme, who did Silence of the Lambs. That's the whole movie of him doing a monologue, and it's absolutely magical. I remember going to see Eric Bogosian. Eric Bogosian, you may know now, is an actor on one of the Law and Order SUV or whatever, and he's also on Succession. But when I saw him, he was a playwright, and he was performing some of his own works, and he wrote and starred in Talk Radio, which is a wonderful Oliver Stone movie about, again, the power that talk has to motivate us into action. I got a chance in my career working in radio to meet people like Jay Thomas. Jay Thomas told the greatest story on television you've ever heard, the Lone Ranger story, it's called. You can Alta Vista that or Ask Jeeves it. And it was a story told so well, and I got to know him in radio when he did radio in Los Angeles, that David Letterman asked him on his show once a year, every year, to tell the same story. Nobody else did that, right? But it was really the power of the spoken word that motivated me. And when I encountered podcasting, I met all of these wonderful people and started to hear all of these wonderful shows that I'd never heard before. And I myself at the time was not a podcaster. I've certainly done my share of podcasts since then. But when I heard those incredible early pieces of work, and I listened to tons of them. Todd, I was one of your first listeners. I guarantee it. I was one of the Ohana very, very early on, right? I wanted to do what I could in the role that I had to try to preserve that bubble, to try to help it to grow, to try to help it to nurture in any way that I could. And the best way that I knew I could do that was to do my job, which was to count things. And I knew if I could count things well and tell those stories well, that the world would see the value of what it is that you do. And that has been my 20-year mission. It's still my 20-year mission. Maybe not for the next 20 years when I get that podcast yacht and I sail off into Podcast Bay or whatever. But it has certainly been my mission up until now. But it's really been driven by a love for the work that you do. And everybody in this room, all of the inductees this year, I listened to your shows way back then. And I wanted to do whatever I could to try to help this industry become what I knew it could be, to really propel the power of the spoken word. I want to read you something really quick, and I'm going to read this because it's not something that I want to get wrong. Another person I got to see speak when I was an undergrad, the poet in residence at Tufts at the time was an amazing poet. He became the poet laureate a couple years after that, named Philip Levine. And Philip Levine worked in the Ford Auto Factory in Detroit while he was honing his craft to become a poet. And he wrote this poem called What Work Is. And I want to read that to you, if you don't mind, a little poetry tonight. We stand in the rain in a long line waiting at Ford Highland Park for work. You know what work is. If you're old enough to read this, you know what work is, although you may not do it. Forget you. This is about waiting, shifting from one foot to another, feeling the light rain falling like mist into your hair, blurring your vision until you think you see your own brother ahead of you, maybe 10 places. You rub your glasses with your fingers, and of course, it's someone else's brother, narrower across the shoulders than yours, but with the same sad slouch, the grin that does not hide the stubbornness, the sad refusal to give in to the rain, to the hours of wasted waiting, to the knowledge that somewhere ahead a man is waiting who will say, no, we're not hiring today, for any reason he wants. You love your brother, and now suddenly you can hardly stand the love flooding you for your brother, who's not beside you or behind or ahead, because he's home, trying to sleep off a miserable night shift at Cadillac so he can get up before noon to study his German, works 8 hours a night so he can sing Wagner, the opera you hate the most, the worst music ever invented. How long has it been since you told him you loved him, held his wide shoulders, opened your eyes wide and said those words, maybe kissed his cheek? You've never done something so simple, so obvious, not because you're too young or too dumb, not because you're jealous or even mean or incapable of crying in the presence of another man. No, just because you don't know what work is. Tonight, I celebrate your work. I celebrate the work that you have done, the work of your words, because it's meant so much to me. And I want to thank Brian and Gavin from Sounds Profitable for making the trip down here to support me. I want to thank my brilliant wife, Tamsin, my constant beam, for always supporting me every step of the way. And I want to thank you for the work of your words. Thank you.